Greetings, colleagues. My name is Mandivamba Rukuni. I'm making this recording for the DWP discussion session, which happened on Monday, the 8th. I'm recording it post-event because somehow the Zoom recording did not work out. I spoke then about the role of land in overall societal development and industrial transformation. So I'll just go through the presentation again, but unfortunately you won't be able to then have the discussion that followed, but at least I'll just try and cover up by giving you the highlights. So I'm starting at the very high level, role of land at the highest level in societal development. Africa is the only continent in the world with no high-income country. Every other continent, Asia, Europe, the Americas, have high-income countries. But Africa today is populated by either a low-income country or middle-income countries. The reason why we don't have a high-income country is every country in Africa is either in a low-income trap or a middle-income trap. And the middle-income trap is occasioned by having the perseverance of these dual economies, which have troubled our economies. In summary, Africa is going through an unorthodox structural transformation process. And that unorthodoxy is what creates the middle-income trap. Because orthodox or classical structural transformation of society means that society starts off with predominantly rural agrarian society, progressively going and transforming into urban industrial society. When that happens normally and properly, like it did in Europe first, with England as the first one, urbanization speeds up, but urbanization is entirely because of manufacturing activities in the urban areas. So orthodox structural transformation is urbanization with manufacturing jobs and also the service industries after that. In Africa, we have unorthodox structural transformation because we are having rapid urbanization, but with no manufacturing. Our cities don't manufacture much. So that's the problem. That's why we end up in the middle income trap. Like I said, the dual economy persists, and the dual economy basically means there's mass exclusion of most of the smallholder farmers and the small medium scale enterprises. They're not part of the mainstream manufacturing economy. So that exclusion means that by the time you reach middle income status, your domestic market is too small. And the symptoms then become your economic growth rate stagnates. In fact, most countries in middle income traps grow around 1%, 2%, maybe at best 3-4%. But we know from experience that if you're in a middle income status and you want to go to high income, like the Asian tigers have done, you have to grow at double-digit figures for at least 2 to 3 decades. Well, Africa is nowhere close to that. The third and most important symptom becomes the inequality that happens. So as the equilibrium rate of unemployment continues to go up, the rich get richer, the poor get poorer. That income gap is what creates social and political unrest. And then at a policy level, when you have society which is far apart, then the policy positions become very contested. So middle income trap is a structural problem. It's not a short-term temporary solution problem that can be solved easily. So having explained that, I therefore want to explain the orthodox classical structural transformation and how land and agriculture feature in that. So a society is broadly agrarian and rural. It always starts with an agricultural revolution, which then accompanies an industrial revolution. There is no industrial revolution which is not preceded by an agricultural revolution. Few countries, that's few countries like Singapore, really tiny kind of nation states which are not typical. Otherwise, the whole of Europe, United States, Australia, New Zealand, it doesn't matter what else you look at, China, Japan, South Korea, you start with an agricultural revolution. Then it is accompanied by a broad-based industrial revolution. And the reason it happens, and the reason why the agricultural revolution or the green revolution starts, is because the mass number of people are still in rural areas. And as productivity goes up in the agricultural revolution, incomes grow, hunger starts to disappear, then you have people who are freer. The labor now can move to industrial sector, because in industry, they are responding to the increase in purchasing capacity of the rural middle class. Factories start growing fast in urban areas. So we have labor being released out of the rural, that's the labor push effect. And then we have labor being in great demand in the industrial sector, that's the labor pull effect. But it's one economy, it's not two economies. As labor is being sucked from the rural to urban, you don't leave poverty in the rural areas. Incomes also rise in the rural areas. Even wages, labor costs, they also rise. Salaries rise even in the rural areas, just as they do in the urban areas. That's one economy, not a dual economy. And that is what has eluded us. And just to sum up this particular aspect, when Europe, starting with England, went through the agricultural revolution, industrial revolution process, following that first wave, the second wave was the same Europeans who went to other parts of the world, and where they were able to really grow faster in population than the local population, using various means that they used in the United States, Canada, Australia, New Zealand. They then applied the European model of structural transformation. The only difference being in Europe, it all happened on small farms. It was all small farms aggregating into the industries. When they migrated, the Europeans, to then colonize North America and Australia and so on, they then were already now large-scale farmers. So they then exported it as a large-scale model. So it has worked in countries where the people of European origins actually managed to grow their populations faster. Where they were not able to grow as fast, like in Africa, South Africa, Zimbabwe, Namibia, and so on, then the model didn't quite work. It ended up as a dual economy model. The third wave was the Asian tigers, starting with Japan, South Korea, and more recently China, and today we talk Vietnam is coming through. Those economies used land and agriculture differently to the first two waves, because now they were faced with a dual economy syndrome, where they really had now to lift a mass number of rural people into the manufacturing economy. So they succeeded, and I'll talk a little later how they succeeded, triggering an agricultural revolution of their own kind, using small farmers and building some of the largest economies in the world. The fourth wave now is the rest of us that have not yet made this transformation fully, and Africa is one place where this has not happened. Other parts in South America and other parts of Asia. So the strategic questions for us as Africans are: what are the macroeconomic foundations of inclusive structural transformation for Africa? can improved land governance and land administration and land reforms address this unorthodox structural transformation? And I think at the foundation is the question as to what happened to the African tradition that always had this wisdom as land being primary, the primary source of all wealth, social status, identity, political power. What happened to that? Because now we are finding that although we have the most abundant land in the world, we are failing to convert that into an advanced society. In my own country, Zimbabwe, the new Minister of Agriculture, December 2020, promulgated a 2-pager statement basically indicating the displeasure of government and disappointment in the actually unacceptable levels of land underutilization. So this is where we are. And this is why we need to engage the land issue across the continent. Like I say, land is the foundation of wealth. All customary land and traditional land is family land, is the starting point for all wealth creation and everything that happens after. It's the secret, even as we transform to industrial society, it's the secret to fast industrialization of our economies, starting with those rural industries, building a much needed rural middle class. That becomes the center of a domestic market for industrial goods and services. That's the kind of structural transformation that we should now look for, led by land as the primary driver and agriculture as well as other rural industries. So the ontological and teleological significance of land is in its traditional appreciation of Africans, in the sense that land is bigger than us. It has actually been here longer than us. It is the mother of all of us. We're just daughters and sons of the soil. And our rural birthplaces, where our forebears are buried, or our ancestors, doesn't only embody our identity, but more importantly, that's rural space is very, very important at a psycho-spiritual level, because that is where we as Africans connect spiritually with the mountains, forests. These are the large bodies of water that have the power and freshness to refresh us as human beings, the energy that the body and spirit needs. And that is why it does not matter how far you are from your home. It does not matter if you have an issue in the diaspora. It could be physically away, but if you had that love for your land and you've got that connection, you'll always be connected. And as I've been saying to my fellow Africans, don't underrate your rural land, your customary land. That's family land. You should modernize, don't westernize. Meaning now go back and make sure that you capture that land and put it in a family trust so that it works for your family and your grandchildren way down, so that it's not going to be easily taken away from your family. So let's commit to physically developing all the land that we have. Don't just build houses. Make every square centimeter of your land loved and productive and homely. So we will, in other sessions, talk about land asset management at that level. But today I'm still at a kind of high level, and I would like to therefore explain a bit more about that middle income trap, to show you that we, like many other countries, have tried to escape from the middle income trap using urban-based solutions, and they have not worked. So I'll explain the 4 options that any country has or have tried to utilize to escape a middle income trap. The first option has always been this import substitution industrialization using protective tariffs. I mean, many countries have tried it. Brazil is a typical case. No country has gone as far as they did and still remained in a middle income trap. They can manufacture anything. Motor vehicles, aeroplanes, name it, they can, but they are still in a hardwired dual economy because you can do all that, and it's mostly urban-based, but you still exclude the majority of your population. So you still end up in a middle-income trap. You still have massive social discontent. You still have massive income disparity. You still have an ever-escalating equilibrium rate of unemployment. The second option is export-oriented industrialization using kind of targeted subsidies for key industries and companies. At the end of the day, you will export a lot all over the world. You will still in a middle income trap because the majority of your people cannot even afford whatever is being exported. Your domestic market is still narrow. The third option is open industrialization, open economy industrialization, where basically you abandon your labor laws, you just build factories and invite in investors to manufacture these consumer products. And it will create jobs at very low levels of income. It still does not take you out of the middle income trap because it's not opening the mass of the rural community to participate in industrialization. You're just bringing in foreign investors to create a few jobs here and there. The fourth option is what the Asian tigers have gone for. That is expanding the domestic market through land and agrarian reforms. An agriculture-led industrialization process. Now, data shows us, and if you look at all the Asian tiger data, at early stages of that transformation, agriculture is still where the majority of the population is. A small investment by the public sector in agriculture produces massive returns in the urban industrial sector. I mean, the data from China was typical. I won't go into detail here, but you'll understand what I'm saying because you've seen the results. But if we broadly look at what the macroeconomic level implications are for Africa to get out of this middle income trap, it's about rural transformation being at the center of government development agenda. It cannot be just a rural development program of one or two ministries. The entire economy has to lift the rural sector. The entire economy has to function as the vehicle that expands that domestic market. So that we're talking wealth creation here. We're not just talking financial progress of a few companies. So as we lift those rural communities, the second thing that we've learned from those who have succeeded is you diversify your industrial sector. Many more different products that are locally consumed rather than upgrade existing factories and hope that you're going to break out of the middle income trap. Thirdly, you then push the backwards and forward linkages between rural and urban areas in many different ways as you can. Connect the rich and the poor, the rural, the urban, you know, the raw material and manufacturing. It is about spatial integration, economic integration of the different sectors, and expand your product base, produce new goods, and really study the local domestic demand. You grow the local market. The European civilization notion of market being God-given, you just respond to the market. Market is God. Does not work for developing countries because there's no market to talk about anyway. You have to create the market. The market is a public good, a result of public investment into the kind of market you want to see, and not just some God-given thing that you wait for, and then you are responding to a market which is underdeveloped. After all, if we don't develop the domestic market, we are over-dependent on foreign demand for our goods and very susceptible to external shocks. So altogether, it's a multi-sector thing, an entire economy-driven thing, and I'll talk more about that in future sessions, especially about devolution and decentralization of the economy and so on. So I did explain during the session, and I showed a diagram which I can't show you now, unless if the camera was able to focus on my diagram, to just show you the transformation I'm talking about. And saying we start with agricultural transformation that and pushes into rural transformation and eventually into urban industrial transformation. So there you are, as society transformed from predominantly agrarian, rural, to predominantly urban, you see agriculture shrinking, and you will see industry exploding. But the significance of agriculture continues to be important. But the reason I'm showing you this transformation, but by the time you get here, 95 to 98% of your population is now urban, rural. But over here, anything up to 80, 90% is rural. So as we try to move from basically a very agrarian society, land is not property. Land is a place of belonging. Land is territory for families and communities and clans. And if the structural transformation happens properly by actually lifting a lot of people from rural agrarian to industry and not just a dual economy, if it is a proper transformation, moving into middle income status means the majority of land can now be released into property that is really got a strong link to the industrializing sector. And then by the time 90% plus of the population is urban, industrial, land is capital. Land, every piece of land is fully loaded into the national system of information. Information becomes wealth, not where the piece of land is, because the entire legal legislative system, the entire financial services system, name all systems will have these pieces of land recorded in their systems, so that the bank in your country can even trade your piece of land all over the place in New York, in Tokyo, because now it's capital. The banker doesn't need to know where it is or even see a picture of it. So what has happened in the case of Africa is that because of the dual economy syndrome, we move a little bit towards middle income. Majority of people still remain here. In extreme cases like Zimbabwe, South Africa, Namibia, when you get to middle income, land still only belongs to a few thousand large farmers, and the rest of the people are poor in rural areas without much land. So when you go through land reform, like we've done in Zimbabwe, in South Africa, and Namibia, if we don't connect the newly yeah. So so in summary, our land reforms. I was using an example of Zimbabwe, South Africa, and Namibia, and so on, because these are the countries where we had massive, large-scale settlements of white farmers, from whom the governments now acquire some of the land for resettlement. In the case of Zimbabwe, the original land reform in the 80s made it possible to acquire, I think, 3 million plus hectares of land for 80,000 households. Now, because at the time, we were not thinking, how do we move towards the industrialization ladder? So these farmers, as they get land from white farmers, the government gets land from white farmers, we redistribute it to smallholder farmers. With immediate effect, the policy should be we redistribute land so that we push the new farmers into an industrial economy. Doesn't matter how small they are, they can still supply factories and supermarkets through aggregation and agro-logistical support from government, parastatals, and private sector. If that doesn't happen, and in the case of Zimbabwe, it did not happen between 1980 and 1990, those farmers never really got connected to mainstream industry and manufacturing. So they revert back to territory. So that land today is now territory, because if you go to the old resettlement areas, you have second, third generation family members who are seated on that land and looking at it as just family land. It's never going to be anything else but family land, which still has to be converted again back to production, into middle income, into high income capital. So the secret to breaking up a middle income trap is to modernize our land tenure systems, modernize our land governance and administration systems. We don't have to westernize them. We use African principles and values in terms of land ownership systems, land rights systems, land governance, which is democratic and highly participatory, and we can still produce very high income industrialized societies of African nature, just like the Japanese and the Chinese did it their own way. You copy from the Europeans, we copy from the Chinese, but we don't have to copy and paste. We copy and do it intelligently, adjust it into an African relevant program. The second thing is to grow the domestic market fast, because it's that rural middle class which consumes locally manufactured products. That rural middle class we'll talk about in a little bit. The third point is embark on an industrial upgrading process. In other words, we start with what we have, which is proto-industrialization. So instead of thinking it's just informal sector, it's just informal ways of additional manufacturing. No, it is proto-industrialization, manufacturing without factories, so that we can start inching towards light industries. So the middle class is the single most important rural group of people to take us on this journey of industrial upgrading and breaking through the middle income trap. So the importance of this is as follows. World over, studies have shown that when rural people's incomes rise from $1 to $2 to $3 a day average, it does not change much in terms of their lifestyles. When you hit $4 a day, you start noticing a change in consumption patterns. These rural people, once they have $4, $5, $6 a day average in their pockets, they start consuming more industrial products, more meat, more vegetables, and more fruits and so on. And that becomes behavior of a middle class. So when we say middle class, we don't mean middle class the same way the Chinese or the Americans or what. It's middle class in terms of change in consumption patterns to an industrial form of consumption. So you and me don't qualify here. We even earn too much. We don't change the economy. It's these rural people with $5, $6, $7, $10 average a day in their pockets who change the entire economy, because they then become capable of consuming manufactured products. And unlike you and me who are used to consuming imported products, rural middle class people at this level will consume locally manufactured products. That's why it then fits in with the idea of rural industrial upgrading and proto industries, which I'll cover in a minute. So essentially, this is the secret to accelerating our industrialization agenda and creating our own demand. So at the back of the rural industrialization agenda that I'm talking about, each and every government, each and every bank, each and every part of our society has to understand industrialization in a different way to what we perceive it to be now. Because I see us just seeing some factories booming away and some big businesses booming away, and we think that's industrialization. No, industrialization is about society at large. It's massification of three things. Always starts with mass production of raw materials, which then goes into mass processing of those materials by local people, and mass consumption of the manufactured goods by the same people. So I'm proposing here a definition of our industrial upgrading as a massification agenda. and you massify within confined spaces. So we must produce raw materials, grains, animals, herbs, the timber. It's all produced as raw material, and then it's mass processed within a maximum radius of 50 kilometers. Most of it should be manufactured there. Okay, some may go out, but let's try and manufacture it in confined. And I'm putting 50 kilometer based on what I've seen in Southern Africa. I've been in other parts of Africa. I think the figure still fits in most countries. Okay, maybe go to 100 kilometers in more sparsely populated countries. But the point still remains that our villages, our small business centers, our small towns should be manufacturing, not just the big cities. If that doesn't happen, the society is not industrializing. You're just industrializing a few centers. Okay. So that's the first thing I want to put down as the massification agenda. So we need to imagine new industrial processes and upgrading the Asian tigers, as we have looked at them and scholars have researched. And for those of you who are keen on reading, you can Google the new stage theory. Basically shows you how the tigers have done it. 3 stages. The first stage is the proto-industries. We call it informal sector. In my country, we even call it CSO. It means it's not really part of the economy. No, the Asians said that is actually what we are going to upgrade, so that each and every part of your country, our country, people manufacture based on the locally produced materials, the local food tastes, because that food sector is a starting point. Instead of importing snack foods from urban areas to rural areas, those should be produced right there in the rural areas. Stage 1, proto-industries. That's what makes it possible to start manufacturing small machines for everything. I mean, today, we in Africa, in my own country, we even import things like noodles from China, toothpicks from wherever, things, nails from wherever. This is stuff that should be manufactured locally using small machines. We need small machines for everything that we need to improve labor productivity. That's what our universities, research institutions, and so on, and innovation centers should be working on. Because it is the proliferation of these small machines that produces the real demand for heavy industries. Because heavy industries means you are now producing the means of production. Now, if you don't have much of light industries in your country, what's the demand for the steel mills? So, but when you have massive light industries coming up because of the local domestic market, it's being mass produced and mass processed and mass consumed within the local spaces, it means many machines are going to be available. Now you can have 5, 10 steel mills, the demand is there. Yeah, because heavy industry is just steel mills and the foundries, but also your articulation of energy, water, etc., etc. So that's what I mean when I say the market is not a private good, it's a public good. It's these types of planning and investments that produce the mass domestic market. For Africa, I would urge our governments, our policymakers, our scholars to think about the market not as a God-given thing as they do in Europe and the United States. It's a public good created through thinking and strategizing, shaping public policy, and good economic governance. Now, COVID-19 has been a blessing to Africa, which we have not taken. Of course, there's this downside, which everyone knows. I'm not even going to bother about it. I'm going to say that COVID-19 showed us that we can't over-rely on global and markets and so on, because something will show up, such as COVID, and no country in the world is ready for it. So who knows what's going to come next? If we don't develop our own systems, our own capacities to produce, our own capacities to manufacture, the future is not for us. We can talk about the African century, but we are not going to be there, copying and pasting everyone else. I mean, like I say, we copy, but we copy intelligently. But we should not want to be American or Chinese or German, because we can never beat the Chinese at being Chinese. But we can beat them any day at being African, especially when we become a sophisticated African. This is the wake-up call that I'm putting out there. That let's take our land, don't give it away easily. Family land, don't look down on family land. And Africans giving away all this family land to foreign investors. And okay. So in conclusion, development is about people. And our development in Africa starts with our land, our family land. Development is helping people to help themselves. You know, building our capacity to dream for ourselves, to learn for ourselves, to innovate for ourselves. You can't have somebody develop on your behalf or dream on your behalf because they are quote unquote wealthier than you are or more educated than you are. People have to dream for themselves and chase their own dreams. Our role is to help people do it for themselves. Build confidence in people. It starts with land. A landless person and a homeless person cannot have confidence. A person without a base where you have been, you feel a sense of belonging. You belong to this culture. With these knowledge systems, there's no perfect culture. So don't be ashamed of your culture. And don't change it from one to the other, thinking the other one will be better. All of them have good and bad. You just keep improving and modernizing. But confidence is about 100% of what you need to make to the next stage. So we have to borrow intelligently, even our land governance systems, our land tenure systems, our land administration systems, our understanding of how we use land to transform the entire society. The only knowledge that matters is what we create for ourselves, not that you just borrow and paste. And we have to modernize Africa, not westernize it, starting with our land systems. Thank you. Bye. Yeah. So in some of the future discussions we're going to have and sessions or even trainings, there are a number of myths and paradoxes about land that I'd like to blast out of the way for you. But once again, it's not about you believing what I tell you. My role is to give you the analysis as best as I know it, so that you can think for yourself and analyze for yourself. But the first myth that exists, especially in my part of the world, is that of large farms versus small farms. It's a myth. You can develop society to the highest level, either on large farms or small farms. The real issue depends on the following. If you have a predominantly labor surplus society, which is rural, then large farms won't do it. Small farms are going to be more efficient, and they're going to lift up your society into a proper, inclusive society. But if you're in a labor scarce economy where most people are already employed and they're in cities, then large farms are going to be more efficient. So it's not either or the other. It's what the circumstances are that determine the most important policy. The second myth is that about tenure systems. Do you use this tenure system, the Western one, or is the African one, which is good or bad? No. Both systems can produce very secure land rights systems. It's the same category of land rights. So it's not about changing the land tenure system. It's about securing tenure rights within each and every tenure system. You can have a multi-tenure system, it doesn't matter. Then there's a myth around financial performance and economic performance. I'm going to spend time on that in future, but once again, we get lost in the idea that as long as businesses are making money, the economy is growing. No, the economy can actually be going backwards, because growing a business and growing an economy is two different things. The fourth is the role of government versus private sector. Yeah. So Africans are bombarded with this idea that governments are not important. They don't have to be strong as long as you have a strong private sector. That's nonsense. You cannot have strong private sector without strong government, unless if it's a banana republic. That's where a company runs the whole country. That's why it's called a banana republic. The real issue is you need very strong government to produce strong private sector because of the processes of structural transformation I already talked about. Then number 5 is this confusion between privatization or commercialization. So Africans are busy selling their parastatals and government-owned state enterprises. No, there's no need. You're confusing privatization with commercialization. Those state enterprises is what we have seen in the Asian tigers helping to lift those who were excluded into a modern industrializing manufacturing society. So yes, you don't need backward, corrupt, maladministered state-owned enterprises. Rather, they should be the best-run entities if this is going to work. Okay, so don't misunderstand me. The state-owned enterprises, if they are the best-run businesses in the country, commercialized, they lift a lot. You don't have to privatize. You commercialize. Then there's the issue of our legal systems, which I'm going to cover on Friday. But anyway, there are many myths and paradoxes I want to cover in future. So please, we'll see you in future events. Thank you.